Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are in our studio, a podcasting studio in Prince George. And we have an interesting podcast today because we have two podcasters podcasting each other today. So I'll start by consent to introduce my podcast, and then I'll give it over to the other person. My name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from the capital of Northern British Columbia, Prince George. And I introduce Doug Bell.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be so much fun today. I'm the podcast host for USIP ISIP, which is another Prince George-based podcast where we interview people from influence in social media, family, and business. And this is going to be such a great conversation, a battle of the podcasters, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, and hopefully some great conversation.
Yeah. No, I like it very much, Doug, because I always encourage people to do podcasting, and wherever the opportunity presents itself, we podcast with them, and today is obviously a special day. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of your background. And you were born in Prince George, I'm quite sure.
Almost. So my family's from Prince George. My mother was born here back a long time ago. I'm not going to say the year because I don't want to embarrass her. And went away to Vancouver to go to school at UBC. Met my father, who is from the Lower Mainland. And they traveled around for a while. I was born in Kamloops, BC. We went to Edmonton and then had an opportunity to start a group of companies here in Prince George.
Yeah, Pat and Brenda are your mother.
That's correct, So many people will know my father, Pat Bell, who is a MLA in the area for about 12 years. And he came back in 1988 with my mom, and they started the Family Fast Foods group of companies, which own the Wendy's restaurants in Prince George. We own the Northern Lights Estate Winery.
Two Wendy's in Prince George, right?
Two Wendy's restaurants
and one to
Prince
come
George.
in Williams Lake.
That's correct. Yeah, we're currently building a new Wendy's restaurant in Williams Lake, BC. We have a U-Brew here called Hobby Brews.
Where is that located?
And that's located on Massey and Ferry there, close to Princess Auto. And then we also have a land holding group of companies. So we have had everything over the years, from logging companies, farming companies, trucking companies, concession stands, Avis car rentals, and more. And in 2007, I had the opportunity to take over our group of companies. And so it's been a really fun journey since really I've been working in the business since 1988 at the young age of 3. I'm not sure if that was legal at the time. And now I get to lead the company for the last now it's been about 15 years that I've been leading our group of companies.
So, and doing very well.
I think one of the...
Especially, and tell us a little bit about, why did you bring all the wine?
Well, I mean, podcasting is more fun with wine, right? And that has been great. No, we actually developed out a concept to build Northern Lights Estate Winery, which is Canada's largest fruit winery. We started building on the concept in 2010, 2011, and actually completed construction and opened in 2015. And initially we thought this would be a pretty niche business where we would make some wine in the winter, otherwise take vacation and holidays, and then sell it in the summer, and it would be a nice little add-on business to our portfolio. But what happened was we opened the business in 2015, sold out of wine in about 2 weeks, and started getting requests for orders.
That sent a message, right? Saying, hey guys, we like what you're doing.
Yes, and it was really exciting to see the reception we received, not just from locals inside the northern BC area, but also from all around BC, all around Canada, and even the world. I mean, we have requests for our product in Texas and South America and China and very many places.
I was talking to your dad, he was a good friend of mine for many, many years. And, and I said, you build the winery and the restaurant was fabulous and absolutely a beautiful, beautiful place, but it's on the wrong side of the river. There's nobody there on that side.
Well, it's
Was
fun.
I wrong or what? Eh?
When we were building Northern Lights Estate Winery, most people thought we were dreaming, but they didn't call it a dream. They called it a delusion.
Delusion.
Right?
Yeah.
And as we started constructing and building, people were surprised to see the success, but we were never surprised.
Yeah.
And so what we've been able to do since that point forward is just showcase and expand out the idea of what entrepreneurship in Prince George can be. But really, like, you are the beginning of the entrepreneurs in Prince George. I mean, not the very beginning, of course, there's been people for a long time. Yeah. But when you talk about success stories, it was people like you that we looked to for that influence and understanding that the road is never going to be easy. However, when you work together and you look for a community that's so supportive like Prince George, you can accomplish a lot. Yeah. And that's what we've always really admired about you and how you've built your own business.
Right, and still am, even at 82, right? So we still poised to grow and getting bigger, and then we love Prince George and the region and all the potential as you do, and this, amazing British Columbia, how lucky we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've always wondered from your standpoint, because you've seen so much change in the city over the years. And for me, I mean, I've been here since 1988, so I've seen a lot, obviously. And unfortunately, I'm getting a few gray hairs here. I'm working my way up.
That's a good sign, Doug.
I think that it shows a little bit of experience anyways. But I'm curious from your standpoint, has there ever been a better time to be an entrepreneur in the city, or what's different now? Because it seems like there's more excitement here than there ever has been.
Yeah, that's a good observation, actually, and a good question. Is that I believe always that Prince George had huge potential. Even when I came here in July of 1965, with my one suitcase, 2 books, 2 sets of clothes, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. I counted my money, and it was at the Greyhound station about 2 blocks up this way, and I counted my money at least 2 or 3 times. I had $25.47, but I had a dream. I was going to build a lumber mill, and I did, but it took me a long time. But I was convinced that this was the area to go, and then the other part, that we were liberated by the Canadians on April the 12th, 1945, and I was only 4 and a half, nearly 5 years old, and it made such an impression on me that from that point forward, I knew I wanted to go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and I always wanted to do that. And then I was going to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me. I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years, mandatory. And then I finally could go to Canada when I was 24.
And so when you first arrived, I mean, it was known in particular in the United States, it was the land of opportunity. Yeah. Canada maybe less known, but very similar in terms of concepts. But Prince George was very small back then. Yeah. I imagine that, maybe some people would be frightened off by that. Maybe there wasn't as much opportunity because it was so small.
Yeah, and that's, again, a good question, because how did I get here is that my dad was managing a small lumber company. My grandfather was a master carpenter, and I never got to know him, but I admired the stuff that he did in churches. All the carpenter work that goes into building those kind of places took a specialist, and he was that. But he died when he was 45, and I never got to know him, but I knew him through his work. And it always impressed me. So I was not good in school, so I went to work when I was 14, was trained as a furniture maker. And so lumber was always on my mind. So going to Canada, I kind of felt that because of my lack of education, formal, I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. So they said, okay, what are we going to do with this guy? Send him to the mentally challenged school, or do we get him a job? So they sent me to a furniture factory. I became a furniture maker, but still had that dream of going to Canada, and kind of felt I had failed in Holland for myself, and I had to prove to myself that I could do things, right? And so I had that dream of building a lumber mill, and I knew enough about Canada that BC is the place you want to go. That's where the timber is. That's where the mill lumber is. And so when I came to Vancouver in late July of 1965 off the train, I went to the immigration department, and there was a German fellow that I told I could speak German, I could speak English, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, go to Prince George. That's how I came here. Den was a boom town. You know, it was kind of the place that you said, okay, when did you come here and when are you leaving, right? And, you know, and I saw then in Prince George already then that because it was the center of British Columbia, it was a natural center for the region, that there was lots of opportunity here then.
Yeah. I had someone come up to me the other day, and they were asking me some questions about like why I do the things that I do. Now, you know, I'm considered an entrepreneur. I'm still very young in my journey, and I hope to accomplish a lot. But one of the things that I've noticed are fairly common among entrepreneurs is the passion for building something. And they don't always know what it is, and it could be a variety of things. I mean, you could be building a hamburger restaurant, or you could be building a sawmill, and it has actually more similarities than differences.
Right.
Do you feel the same way? Is that like part of your passion? Because at your age, you're still building new companies and trying to develop the region itself.
I'm an entrepreneur by birth, virtually. You know, like even... And if you read my book, and I can show you a copy of it, and I know you have it, and you've been a busy man as well, and then it's still sitting there. But once you read it, you know, the book, then what you will, in particular in regards to that question, is that I was only about 9 or 10 years old, and I already not very good in school. My mind was always elsewhere. ADHD. I didn't know then. I didn't find out until I was 57. But that's already, I couldn't sit still in school and wait. And so what I would do is I would distribute newspapers, I would collect bottles and all those kind of things to make a few pennies in Holland, even at that age. And then I got in trouble because I found an old one-shear plow. I somehow got it on a cart, and I hauled it down to the old steel dealer, and I sold it to him. I got 5 guldens for it. That's about $2. And then what happened is that in our house, somebody called on the door, and there was the police. And then my mother's, and they said, well, there's a problem here because John sold your son, right? Yeah. He had this plow and it didn't belong to him, and so he called me over. He said, John, okay, the police is here for you. And so they said, did you take that plow? I said, yeah. And then I said, I got $5 for it, or 5 guldens. They had a very difficult time not to kind of burst out in laughing. But yeah, so I already was then an entrepreneur. So it's by birth, I already was hustling and doing things. And if I sat in school, then I was thinking about what do I do now? And so it has become part of my life. Was always that way. Yeah. And I enjoy that.
Yeah, I have. You know, I didn't have as many of those experiences. I didn't get arrested when I was younger, thankfully. But
you didn't see the plow.
Yeah, that's right. If I saw the plow, I may have. One of the things growing up in a family of entrepreneurs, and you know, with my father who was building businesses constantly, is he would always drag me along, right? And that was something that was really
exposure. Yeah,
it was really special because I wasn't given things for free. He would actually focus on me as an individual, and you know, if I was going to get something, I was going to earn it.
Yeah.
So, I didn't get an allowance. I got a chance to work for 5 cents an hour. He said I was worth every penny.
Yeah.
And I probably was. I don't know. But he also gave me the opportunity to make mistakes. I remember working on his pickup truck. He was working on his logging truck, and he said, okay, I've got some lights I need you to wire into my pickup truck.
Yeah.
So he kind of gave me a rough outline of what I was doing. I was probably no older than 7 or 8 or 9 at the time. And I started playing around with this wiring and bringing everything into the fuse panel. And he looked over and he saw smoke billowing out of the cab of the truck. Not a good sign at all. No. And so he comes over and I get out and my hair is sticking up. And of course I may have shocked myself a little bit. And he didn't yell at me. He didn't say, you did it wrong. He'd say, well, what did you learn? Don't try and do this without unplugging the battery. That was the first thing.
Yeah.
And there are things like that over time where sometimes it's important for you to get the opportunity, but also to get the opportunity to fail, not just succeed.
Exactly.
Because that, makes you smarter over time.
Yeah.
I remember another instance that I was helping him out in his shop when he was building some things, and I kept on going back to him and asking him. I'd say, what do you want me to do now? What do you want me to do now? What do you want me to do now? And he looked at me and he said, I don't care. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you expect me to read your mind? And he said, he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, yes.
Yes.
And for a lot of parents, they probably would sit there and think, how crazy is that? How rude was he to you?
Yeah.
But yet it actually kind of had an opposite effect on me where I started to think about, oh, well, you know what? I shouldn't be waiting for someone to tell me what to do.
Right.
I should think critically, figure it out, and then just start developing out a process.
Exactly.
Now, building business is all about that.
It's all about that.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that when you have a problem, and there's problems every single day in my organization and your organization, we're almost like firefighters in a way.
Yeah.
Then we have to just think critically, and there's no one who's going to tell us what the right answer is.
No.
We just got to figure it out.
I always say the difficult we do right away, the impossible takes a little longer.
Yeah.
And then I'm a perpetual optimist. You seldom will see me that no matter what the circumstances may be, that I will find a way to figure it out and make it work. And if I'm pursuing something, if I can't get through the front door, I go to the back door. If I can't get through the back door, I go through the window. If I can't get through the window, I go through the chimney. But I'm going to get in, or I'm going to get it accomplished. And that's usually the attitude that I have, is be positive and stay the course, never give up, and all those elements, so are critically important, and then things, from time to time they get difficult, and that was actually the reason for my book. Is not saying, oh, how successful is John, hurrah, hurrah. That's not what it's about. It's just about the absolute opposite, as with all the challenges that I had, part of the war, the end of the war, where we saw far too much, and we had hunger and all the other things associated with it. But you now see in the Ukraine was also happening there in Holland during the occupation by the Germans of Holland, and I still remember that now, the pain of hunger, and we had nothing to eat. My dad was caught in the bombing of Rotterdam, and we didn't know for 5 years if he was dead or alive. And then going with little gunny sacks in the railroad yards with my brother, who was 2 years older than me, my sister 1 year old, and every day we would go in there, pick up anything that was burnable or edible. And then the anxiety of my mom, while there were hundreds of bombers overhead, going to Germany and bomb it, it creates that, those kind of things you never forget. And then at the same time, when the Canadians were liberating my part of Holland, and the Germans were fleeing, they blew up the bridge in front of our house, and Some people were shot. Our neighbor got a bullet right through his face and was hanging out of the window. We should have never seen that. And you saw carts with legs and arms hanging out, which was never good. So you ended up with PTSD that stays with an individual for probably the rest of their lives. And then, the fear of losing that protection of the mother, who was the only one there because everybody else had no time for you. They were too preoccupied to keep their own self alive, and the issues around the inner child, and then later on having, in addition to that, recognizing was not successful in school, but not until I was 57 that I found out ADHD. But then all along that way, going to Canada, starting over new right from the bottom up, knowing that, proved to myself more than anybody else that I could do it, and obviously it involved all kinds of challenges. That's what this book is about. It's about that people say, well, because of this, that, and the other things, I can't do that. Or this is the reason that I will not be successful, or all those kind of things. And I say, no, that should not be.
Yeah.
I'm writing another book right now that is also on the same subject, the finding your passion, living the dream. And that's about people that either already have a dream fairly early in life, like you and I had, because of your dad and what he showed you. The same with my parents. My dad, was in the lumber, and my grandfather, and so that already was my passion. But so many people, are not sure, what do you want to do? I don't know, and then, the earlier you have a direction, you meaning the general public out there, in life where you want to go, the more you can focus on that, the better you will become at it, likely. If at some point, which happens to people, you make a mistake, so many people, in terms of choices of careers, so many people, say, I hate my job, and can you imagine if you hate your job, it affects everything around you. So that book is coming out in next July.
Yeah, and you have been so generous with sharing your experiences and your knowledge, and really trying to do it for a benefit of other people, not necessarily for financial return.
Right.
You've got the two books, of course, Against All Odds and ADHD Unlocked. And what's the name of your new book coming out?
The title is not quite sure, but I believe it will say Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. Right.
And so when you're creating these books, and I'll kind of stick on Against All Odds, because I think the principles in there are so simple, yet they are applicable to everybody.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you writing it as in you're trying to reach maybe your former self, or are you trying to reach today's individuals? Because of course, people growing up today didn't have the same experiences that you had, and in a way, that's actually created maybe a disadvantage for them because they didn't have the challenges they had to overcome to understand what hard work would be to achieve their great success.
Yeah, and I think, the good question is that I do it for those and others likely, that the challenges that I had and the difficulties became to me an asset more than a liability. If without that, and not being very good in school, and already starting work with my hands when I was 14, gave me a huge advantage here in building my mill, physically being involved in and all those sort of things. And so the reason I wrote the book is that for all those that question themselves if they can do it, or if they are good enough, or what is, anything that you want to accomplish, whatever that may be. If you want to be the best lumber piler in the world, you can be that too. And when I was a lumber piler for quite a number of months, actually, then I was going to be the best one that was there. That was always my objective. Yeah. And so my message is to the population in general, and especially young people, is that that I want to tell them the story and how quickly things can change. that all of a sudden the people in the Ukraine that we see now on TV never anticipated what would happen there until their whole life changed. And the same, just the experience that I had, and I was born during the war, so I didn't know anything else. But for my parents, how quickly, a perfect life changed into something altogether different. That's why it is also important to me, Doug, that every year I've done for the last 20 years, at least speak to 4 or 5 schools in the week of the 11th to talk about how lucky we are and what is the purpose of the 2 minutes of silence, and what does that really mean, and what happened to those that were there, and and how quickly everything can change around it, and to appreciate what you have. Because that's what happened then. It happens in the Ukraine, and appreciating the things that you have, and looking around and your family, and all the things and the opportunities are so important.
It's so much about perspective, right? And today we are probably more than in any time in history focused on so many things that we can't control. And a war is a good example of something that you couldn't control, which completely changed your life, but it had a direct impact on you. There are so many components of the things that I think create anxiety today, that create fear, that create uncertainty, that are they're indicating situations that don't necessarily affect people, and yet they let it affect them in their life. And social media has done an incredible job of bringing the world together. And we are able to see and hear so many different perspectives. There are obviously lots of people who don't agree with the way that it's been moderated, and that's understandable as well. But now that we are so focused on what's happening externally to our own lives, we're also creating scenarios where people are less fulfilled with what is happening within their own self. And so how do you challenge people to overcome these obstacles and make sure that they keep in perspective what really matters to them? I mean, obviously family, friends, and the things in your own community.
The other thing about it is, to really go down to basics, even for young people, is that, finding your passion is important. Whatever you do, do it well. I don't care if you sweep the floors or you're a cleanup man. I've done all of that, but I always made sure I did it well. And I remember from this one person, that my dad had this. With all due respect, I'm an old guy, but he had, for the purpose of this conversation, he had this old guy, probably not even as old as me, who was retired and was a very good mechanical individual that they had a molder or a planer where they made, moldings, and he was very good at what he was doing, and I was supposed to pick him up in the morning from his house in a car, bring him to work. When I picked him up, I would say good morning, and he would say hi, and for the rest he wouldn't say anything. And then I dropped him off at the mill, and then in the evening I was supposed to pick him up. And then as I drove towards the mill to pick him up, I always remember I watched where he is. I opened the door, and there he is standing there and looking at the planer, and then as he walks towards the door, halfway to the door, he stands back, he turns around, and he stands there, he looks at the planer. And he just stands there, and he looks at the planer. I thought, what the hell is he doing? And they just stand there. And then he turns around, and I was ready to go home. And then I dropped him off, and why was he standing there? Because of pride in his job. So before he left, he made sure that he polished up the planer, and he made sure everything was in its place, and he was standing there contemplating what he had done that day and was getting ready mentally for the next day. That's what is pride. And I say to younger people and other people, enjoy what you're doing and do it well, because it is so rewarding if you do. And if you aspire to a job, whatever that may be, then enjoy it. If you don't like the job or your career, hence follow your passion, living the dream. That's the whole idea. Create that passion, because if you then enjoy it, then all the people around you enjoy being in your life. If you hate it, you go home and you take it with you. You hate your job. And then, but I say, find your passion, living the dream. And the process sometimes in finding it is that somewhere on the way you can say, you know something? I really don't like this guy. So what I'm going to do is have made a decision. I'm going to go back to school. I said, first class. That's what you should do.
I've seen this so often, and for myself, my friends, my family, but in particular, I see this often with employees, Barry, because as an employer with over 170 employees at any given time in the city of Prince George, I get to see a lot of different personalities.
Right.
And one of the things that has occurred, I think, over the last few years, and this is in no disrespect to any generation, because I don't believe in, as millennials or Gen X, or no one is lazy. It's like we've set them up in a way to be successful or unsuccessful ourselves. But one of the things that there is a little bit of impatience now in the work culture, that we want to get to a certain level faster, right? And so we sometimes we believe that we can skip past a few steps that you need to learn to gain experience to be able to do things. And what you see often is kind of two different workplaces. One workplace where you have people working there just because it's the most amount of money they can get, or they don't have any passion in it, but they believe it will bring them the lifestyle that they are so wish, yet they're not passionate about the work, and therefore over a period of time you see that reflected in their work. And then there's another type of workplace where people are very passionate about what they do, and so they're willing to work a few extra minutes at the end of the day. They take a lot of pride in what they're doing. They spend more time, honing their craft and working with their employer to develop into, a greater person. And that is reflected in their home life, and it's reflected in their work life. But ultimately, I think that as an employer, we have somewhat of a level of responsibility to actually tell our employees this, and to go to them when we see them, struggling, and say, I see you're struggling. Maybe this isn't the right job for you. Not that I want you to leave. You might be a great individual, but could I support you in finding the right position for you? And it could be within the company, or maybe it's not within the company. But if we're able to do that, then other employees will see that, and they'll see that our passion for supporting our people more. And then hopefully that will actually end up helping our own business, even if it means losing somebody good.
It's again a form of management, right? But I've always believed, I'm no different than anybody else. To me, I have to go to work. I enjoy my work. That's what I do. The same. I'm just part of the company. It always starts with me. I respect everybody. And that does not mean to say that I don't take my management job serious. I would say there's two me's. One, I own the company, and the other one I'm managing, and I do a good job of managing. But it always starts with respect. I have no in terms of genders, in terms of no prejudice in any form, whatever that may be. I will always respect people as a foundation, and at the same we demand the same in return, and that's the culture of the company. And everybody that knows me knows that that's what we do in our companies. And at the same time, if I can help in terms of making choices either directly or indirectly related to the company, I always say they should be free to ask questions. If they see something in the company they don't understand, my door is always open. Just ask me, as to why are we doing whatever we are doing, so that at least I don't want anybody to go home and then lay awake at nights because they don't know what is happening in the company. What are we doing? Because because we are their peace of mind. That's that help them in meeting their commitments, and I think we owe that to an employee.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I think that statement, open door policy, is one of the most misunderstood or misused forms that a company has. Every company out there, I don't care what company it is, will tell you they have an open door policy.
Right.
But it's actually about how it's implemented. And I had this instance even more recently where I've had employees going through an exit interview or talking to them later on, and them saying, well, hey, like you have an open door policy, but then here's all these things I didn't tell you. And so what it's taken back to me is that I actually have to instigate that open door. A lot of times it's actually not about them coming through my door, it's about me going through their door. And so I've made a much more concerted effort in the last few years to really go to each of my employees or each of the key employees and ask, like, how are you doing personally? Like, how are you doing professionally? Do you have the tools you need? What would you like to accomplish? What would you like to see happen? And sometimes that changes. Like when you meet someone and they're young and they're excited and they get into the company and they start going down their journey, they may have the wish and the desire to take over the company. And so they will work really hard and they'll do everything that you ask of them, even more. And they take a lot of pride in their work. And then after a couple of years, you might see things are kind of sliding a little bit. And you go back and you talk to them and you say, do you still really want to get to this place? And they'll say, well, you know what, I'm married now and I've got children and I need to get out of here by 4:30 to make sure that I can go to this sports event or make sure I can put them down to bed at night. And so they change over time, and it's up to me or you as leaders to actually meet them where they are and find out ourselves, not wait till they come to us. There was another thought that came to my mind this morning. I was thinking about how often over the years I've heard somebody tell me that, I'm leaving my company because they didn't promote me. And I would often ask them, like, did you talk to them? Do they know that you wanted to be promoted? Mm-hmm. And I found that often, this is for many of my friends and even myself at times, although I've been fortunate to be the leader of the company for a long time, that they will believe that you should know these things. How could they not know? Or, I've worked here for so long, I should be moving forward into the company. And often there are kind of two things that I've found that are mistakes that are made from the employee side, and generally that's because it hasn't been communicated well enough. Number one is you actually have to talk to them. You need to tell your employer what your desires are, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, and then it's up to them to actually tell you how you're going to get there.
Right.
And so great leaders will already know these things, or they will reach out to the person and find out on a regular basis. And then the second thing, and I think this is a little less understood, is that most of the time when people are trying to get a promotion, I have found that they actually are trying to impress their boss. All of their attention and focus is on impressing their boss, when the fact is that most if not all of their attention and focus should be on their key employees, either below them or at their level, right, and creating a success within their organization on what they can control. And by doing so, their boss is going to actually acknowledge them and they're going to notice them because they are doing so much more for the company by supporting the people within it, rather than just trying to focus on the person above them and impressing them by doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I think these two things could be implemented by almost anybody to create success within their organization, and then they will be rewarded by promotions.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And, but I usually say inside a company, sometimes, because there are so many employees in so many different locations that having direct contact sometimes is difficult, mm-hmm. But then it becomes important to make sure that the managers in those different departments make clear that the avenue to success in the company is this way. And then the other part that I usually say to people is that the cream always comes to the top. It doesn't happen you came here today and therefore tomorrow there are certain expectations. If you stay the course, keep doing the right thing. To me, it was always important, even when I was piling lumber and couldn't speak the language, for 9 months piling lumber of 4-inch boards by 10 inch wide, 18 to 24 foot long on strips that were dipped in PCBs to a depressed mold. I was soaking wet from the toes to the top of my hair. I knew it would take just a matter of time until I would be noticed. And so, how I did make the impression is simply because I was there every day. I came early, I left late because I always wanted to make sure my work site was clean. And when I became a supervisor of the green chain, then I made sure everybody's location didn't make me popular, actually. And then I became, my objective was to become a lumber grader. The next stage was to become a sawmill foreman. It was in a year and a half from staying here with my $25.47. I was the superintendent of the mill.
Wow.
And then another year later, I was a general manager of a sawmill in Watson Lake, Yukon, of all places, and part owner. And then, so what I'm saying is, what you're saying is absolutely correct, is saying that my philosophy has always been cream will come to the top, so that then for me personally, as I pursued my career in different places, is I needed to get on the picture. If I keep consistently do the good job, then I will be noticed. It may not be quite as quick as I'm hoping for, but I will be noticed. Why? Because I keep doing the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. And part of that is what I say in here, which is important, that has always been the foundation of my life. Attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows is success. Mm-hmm. The other thing as you look at this, so you find the same thing. If you look at the book, can you see what the price of the book is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's $25.47, which is exactly how much you had when you first came here.
And that's the same on the other book. So my price of $47.
That's, and with inflation, you got to imagine that's a deal today.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So, Doug, tell me a little bit more about your wine that you have here, and this amazing things that you guys have accomplished. I said it to your dad at one point. I said, I can't understand why you put it on the wrong side of the river, but it was the right side because it's the sunny side of the river. Yeah. And then the location is unique, especially the way you guys build it, and then it is so well lit up. For those people in Prince George, there are probably not many, that have not driven by it, even over River Road to kind of see it there. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. The other thing that I found out is that, when you guys started doing this, is I always say you cannot be successful or you cannot succeed, or you cannot soar like an eagle if you work with a bunch of turkeys. You need good people and a good team around you.
Yeah.
And I think you guys did that in a number of locations. And then the other part about I don't drink, but the wine that you make is very unique. I had no idea how popular it is, and then you guys also on a national level are rated very highly, number one in a lot of cases because of the different products that you manufacture.
Yeah. So first off, many people wonder what is fruit wine, right? Because they think aren't grapes fruit, and the fact is that that there's really two distinctions within the wine world. Okay. There's grape wine, and then there's fruit wine, which is made from all fruits other than grapes, but that also includes vegetables, right? It could include flowers in some cases, right. But it's non-traditional wine.
Right.
Fruit wine has been around from before grape wine was ever developed.
Right.
And it is very common occurrence across the world. But in the wine world, there was quite a few years where fruit wines were considered inferior to grape wines because they were sweet, sugary, and juicy.
Right.
Often would give you a headache at the end of the night,
Right.
and they weren't considered very high quality.
Okay.
So when we first started developing Northern Lights Estate Winery, we actually didn't know if we would be a fruit wine or a grape wine. And we started doing a lot of research. So through the first few years, we visited over 80 wineries and in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, even into the US. And one of the things that we noticed was that there wasn't a lot of fruit wines, but there was a demand for fruit wines. But what it really was actually was we went into a winery, which at the time was the most northern winery in BC, located in Cache Creek, called Bonaparte Bend. And the owners were incredible people, very, very friendly. And they invited us in. And when we first heard it was fruit wines, we almost walked out. We were kind of in the same place that so many other people are today and were previously before we came around in terms of thinking of fruit wines as inferior products. But they said, come try some of our products and before you decide on what it is that you're going to like or not like. And so we went in with an open mind. And we tried the products and we were just blown away because they had the same body acidity, tannin, and structure and complexities that you expect out of grape wines. They weren't as sweet as we expected. They didn't give us that headache the next day. They were just exactly what we expected out of grape wines, but there was an infinite number of new flavors. And so this was really exciting to us. At the same time, we took about 80 trees out of my dad's front yard and we started planting a bunch of different fruits and grape varieties that were northern. Before we built Northern Lights Winery.
Right.
And we started looking at what would grow well here, what did it taste like, and what could we make. And we came to two conclusions. Number one, fruit wine had an exceptional opportunity because there was relatively low supply and there was significant demand that wasn't being met at the time. The second thing was that although you could grow grapes in northern BC, in Prince George in particular, that you wouldn't necessarily get the sugar content and the acidity that you required to make the highest quality wines. So for us, it was actually a pretty easy decision in the end to move towards becoming a fruit winery. And so we actually had to really start from the beginning to make sure that we were going to be the highest quality product potential that we could be. And so we went out and we acquired our winemaker, Christine Leroux, who's an incredible individual, incredible human being, who had the pedigree of a high quality winemaker from the grape wine world. And because she was actually trained in the old world, she was trained in the Bordeaux region of France at Petrus Winery, which is one of the most famous, oldest wineries in the region.
Wow.
She then went to Australia, made wine there. California, made wine there, and learned all the different techniques. And
how did she end up here?
Well, she's Canadian. She's actually Quebecois.
Right.
And she came back to BC and took over some of the largest wineries in the area, in Niskayuna, Great Monk, and others, and did significant portions of their winemaking production. And around 2000, she decided she was going to move not away from grape wines, but what she wanted to do was she wanted to help winery owners. There was a huge explosion in small-scale wineries at the time. And what was important and interesting was there was a lot of winery owners who could not afford to have their own winemaker come in. No. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to learn how to make wine themselves. And that's what she did. Yeah. So she took all of her experience in grape winemaking from across the world, and she started training winery owners to make their own wine in small batches. One of those owners was Miranda Halliday from Elephant Island in the Naramata Bench. And that was previously the largest fruit winery in the province. So she started playing around with fruit wines, and she found that she could do all of these things that she was doing with grape wines, with fruit wines, and create that new expectation that people had. And so fast forward 15 years later, we were out looking for the highest quality winemaker we could, and she put up her hand and said, I'm going to help you do this. And
where was she then?
Yeah, she was in Penticton, and she still lives there today.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was we came to her with our amateur recipes that Pat and I had been working on for the past few years, and we said, okay, we need to do this, but we need to now do this on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
And with the quality people expect from the VQA or the Vintners Quality Assurance within the BC wine sector. And she said, let's do it. And we just got to work. We started working with her recipes.
Did she come to Prince George then?
She comes to Prince George often and started training me and later on our director of operations, who was employee number 1 with our company and is now a partner in the business, Noemi Touchette. And over time, we were able to develop these recipes that I think just blew people away when they tried it for the first time because they weren't expecting it. So, I mean, when you think about high quality wines, one of the biggest things that people are looking for is the experience that they're going to have with it. And so when you're drinking wine, what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to create an experience, and that starts with what is the food pairings, what is the setting? Like, am I bringing this bottle of wine to my partner's parents for the first time? Yeah. Am I bringing this bottle of wine to a friend's house for dinner, or am I just doing it for a girls' night? And each one of those experiences are created and enhanced with the wine. Yeah. So I see wine not necessarily as a product, but as an experience. And so what we've tried to do is create a portfolio which can interact with each of those experiences in a way that people are going to feel good.
So how many different wines you make?
So
you have 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we actually make about 20 different wines, and each wine is developed with a very specific circumstance in mind. Yeah. And that could be a specific food pairing. It could be, what type of consumer is going to enjoy this? Is this a younger consumer?
Must be quite a process.
It is, but it's a fun process because what we find is that over time, we've had to add new wines into our portfolio when we see a market that's being underserved. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't.
So a lot of it is water.
Yeah, so what you do when you're making these wines, or any wines in general, is you have to first select the best quality fruit. And I think one thing that's interesting is that most people think of fruit wines as this is a blueberry wine, or this is a rhubarb
That's how
wine.
I would think about
it. That's right. But you would never say that in the grape wine world. You would say this is a Cabernet Sauvignon, right? This is a Pinot Gris. And those are just different types of grapes. Right. So first we actually have to go down to the very basics, which is what type of fruit is it, and then what variety of fruit is it?
So how do you express that then in the bottle here?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting, and it depends on the type of wine. So you'll notice that a lot of our names, like in this case, the Cuvée Noir, which is our red Wine Masters blend, isn't named after the fruit all the time. Sometimes it is. For instance, our cranberry wine, which is extremely successful during the turkey holidays, is named after cranberry because that's the experience we want to get with it. But other wines like our Seduction is about an emotion or a feeling you're going to have.
So the strawberry rhubarb wine.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we do when we're developing out the wines is we really try and think about who's going to drink it, what's the experience we want, and it comes all the way from the name to the variety to the finishing of the fruit.
Right.
Now, when we're making the wine, of course, we're going to have all of the fruit. We bring it in. We actually have 4 orchards that we own or lease, all the way from Prince George to Chilliwack, BC.
Oh, wow.
So we're across the province. And then we get the varieties, the fruits, and when we harvest is also very important because we want to get the right sugar content, the right acidity, and the right flavors. And when those 3 things align, we say this is a very good year. This is the best quality fruit we can hope for.
Right.
We harvest, and then we will actually freeze that fruit for about 6 weeks at a minimum.
Is that as part of the process?
Yeah, and that's a little bit different than in the grape wine world. In the grape wine world, you're typically harvesting and pressing out fresh fruit. And the reason is that most grape wines, you don't want skin contact during the fermentation process because it can provide different flavors and bitterness that you don't necessarily want in the wine. Okay. But with our fruits, the vast majority of them, we actually want to include the skin of the fruit when we're fermenting it.
Okay.
And of course, fermentation is the process.
What is fermenting?
Yeah, so it's the process where the yeast eats the sugars that are naturally occurring in the fruit and creates alcohol.
Is that when they walk in it?
Yeah. No, that's usually you're pressing it out, but that is really fun to watch as well.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't have to do that anymore, so don't worry. My feet have not been on your wine. So we do the fermentation process with the skin on. And so by freezing the fruit, we can actually unlock flavors, aromas, nutrients, and colors from the skin of the fruit, which actually enhance the quality of the product we get.
Interesting.
And so this is one of the differences that we started with when we were learning how to make wine in this new age.
Right.
The other thing that we did was when the wine was being made is we actually had to really think about what was the blend going to be to get the outcome we wanted.
Yeah.
And any one fruit can have really great characteristics and characteristics that we don't necessarily want to include.
Right.
You were looking at the Seduction wine, which is our strawberry rhubarb.
Right.
And most people, when they think of a strawberry wine, they've got that bright red color with a ton of sugar and sweetness and fruity aromas. We want some of those things, but if you had too much strawberry in it, it wouldn't pair very well with a lot of food because it would be too sweet and too fruity.
Right.
So we've added almost 80% rhubarb into that wine.
Right.
And rhubarb itself doesn't have as much fruit flavors, but what it does have is really great acidity and balance.
Okay.
So by doing it in that way, we can take the best qualities of the rhubarb, the best qualities of the strawberry, and make a wine that is actually more like a traditional grape Gewürztraminer.
Is that the middle one then?
Yeah, that's the middle one. It's got
and
that nice rosé
that looks
color.
white to me. No, it doesn't look like...
Yeah, we call it rosé, but in the fruit wine world, there's not really such thing as red and white and rosé. We actually just kind of call them based on what the fruit color is going to be.
Right.
And that's really fun with fruit as well, is that you're going to have so many infinite numbers of colors, aromas, flavors.
So became the hobby the business? Because that's kind of the way it looks to me, is that all of a sudden you pushed a button there that was interesting, and then it became, there is a market for it, and then the market became larger and larger, and then as you guys had the right people working, putting the product together, it became very successful, and now the challenge is now you have to get bigger.
Well, I mean, that is always the challenge with any business person.
Right sizing is the key.
Yeah, you say, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's not always the case.
No.
But in general, I mean, I'm a young guy. I want to accomplish a lot. I think that one of the fun things about this part of our business, of course, we have lots of other segments of our business, but in the winery side, we're doing a couple things. First off, we're making a great quality product, which is redefining a market. We're educating people and we're creating experiences across Canada.
Right.
And that's really exciting for me. But number two is we're also showcasing Prince George. Yeah. And this was very important. As a matter of fact, I traveled for about a month every year from the time I graduated high school until 2019 when COVID started and my son was born. And one of the things that always surprised me when I traveled is every time I came back to the city of Prince George, I was just shocked and amazed and awed at what an amazing place we live in.
Right.
And I didn't feel like we were getting the respect and the recognition within the city that we should.
Right.
So another thing that was really kind of a part of my passion is agritourism, because in Prince George, but across the world, food is something that brings everyone together.
Right.
And whether it's the farms that make the food or the table that we sit at and eat, that is something that everyone can connect with in the entire world.
Right.
And so I thought it would be really fun if we were able to bring an agritourism business to Prince George. And so I was down in Kelowna recently, and we were tasting some of our wines, and every single time you mention, this is BC's most northern winery located in Prince George, they are always like, oh, wow, that's exciting. I didn't know Prince George had a winery. And so we're creating experiences, and we're actually bringing recognition to Prince George for something that is that people love.
Right.
Since we started doing this, we've attracted people from across North America to come to this city just to experience our winery.
Right.
And I don't know that there's much better feeling that you can get when someone comes in and they tell you, you know what, I didn't enjoy wines before, or, you know, I enjoyed wines, but when I tried yours, it really became the one that I go to. It's like, I remember I went to your winery and my cousin was getting married and I had never heard of it before. But then I went up and I tried the product and I just thought it was incredible. And oh, by the way, you're on the Nechako River, which flows into the Fraser, which goes all the way down to Vancouver. So we're connected in this way. And so you create these experiences and really great feelings about the city.
Right.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unique. Mm-hmm. And what else have you got there in the other one?
So, I mean, one of the cool things about being a fruit winery is we can do things differently.
Yeah.
So now we're producing products in cans, in pouches, in different size bottles. And what this is doing is we're just trying to bring it and make it more convenient and easier for more people. Yeah.
So this is wine?
Yeah, so that's wine. And so one of the things that we recognized when we started to build out our portfolio was that people use wine in different scenarios. So for instance, the pouch that you're holding is incredible when you're going on a camping trip, you're going out to the lake. Perfect. You don't have to have a glass bottle. This is actually more environmentally friendly, and it holds wine for a much longer period of time because there's less oxygen contact as you're draining the wine out. And so that's something that fits a very specific event for people. We also have a canned product, which is great for people when they're going out and they don't want to have it in a glass, right? If they're going to a friend's house or they want that wine experience of the white wine feeling, but they actually want more flavor than, you know, some of the other products on the market. Right. So we're trying to meet the consumer where they are. And make sure that we have the right product market fit. And it isn't much different than, you know, you producing lumber. Right. In a way. It's you have a market and you have to know what is it that the consumer wants. How can I best service that with the materials that I have? And then ultimately you need to listen to your customer and see if they respond in a positive way, you keep doing it.
So where do you go next with the wines?
So now, we are currently at max capacity within our existing production facility. Right. So we actually purchased a property on the Fraser River about 3 years ago and have now been developing it because, of course, if you're here in Prince George, and if you're going to have a great quality product, you need the fruit to support that. Yeah. And so we've now developed out about 15 acres of it, and we continue to plant every single year. Okay. And what we're doing is, as those plants grow and we can produce more fruit, we're going to be able to produce more wine. So that's going to allow us to build a new facility, which we think we're going to be able to triple our production from where we are today. That will put us in the top 10 wineries in British Columbia in terms of total production and sales. Right. And we hope to do that in the next few years. And then from there, we hope that we will become one of the most notable wineries potentially in Canada over time and redefine this industry, which is fruit wines. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, far beyond what I had thought. Amazing product and amazing success story, really. And all of that for our guest, far and wide, that all happens in Prince George. So, Doug, that then being said, I enjoyed our podcast. I enjoyed meeting you. We had never met really officially before, I don't think.
Yeah, we travel in a lot of the same circles, and we've got an opportunity to interact, but never on this level. And it's so much fun when you get into the deeper conversations that we've had today.
And I enjoyed your podcast, and and I enjoyed doing it together as a whole new concept to our guest, and and we should stay in touch and kind of stay in touch on the podcasting as well. And then, at least make sure every so often, we try to do something together.
Yeah, thank you, John, and it's so much of a pleasure for me to get to interact with you, because you are a legend in the Prince George region, and also I think you're an inspiration to many. What you've accomplished in your career, what you continue to accomplish, I think really tells you that there is no limit, and if you want to accomplish something, work hard and you'll get there.
Absolutely. Doug, thanks.
Thank you so much.